Hi, my name is Ellie Nicole, and today I will be talking about the time when I almost joined a cult. I didn't even realize it until I told my mom about it, and then she told me to tell my uncle, who is a prominent member of his church. He's an usher, and he's traveled to different churches to speak the word of God. And when I told him about it, he told me to leave. I'm not going to get too much into detail because I feel like I'm just going to have an hour-long video. But I just want people to be aware of the signs of what someone will say to you in order to join a cult. And I feel like I was completely blind to the signs because I was so naive. And that's what cults do. They prey on people who are naive. They prey on people who do not have much because they want you to rely on them to join their organization or their cult.
You see what I have up here? You got, as our people already know, we were colonized people, right? And now our people are looking for our identity, right? We have an identity crisis on our hand amongst our people, our community, as a collective of people. And some of our people have decided to go back and say, you know what? We as black people are actually Indians, right? And that doesn't mean the word Indian does not exist, okay? Because the United States of America and the United States recognizes the name Indian in their Constitution, Article 1, Section 2 and 8, I do believe. It's Article 1, Section 2 and 8. So we got our people now putting feathers in their hair, trying to become Indians again. Well, I got no problem with that. Why? Because Indian reservations and the word Indian is recognized in the United States of America's internal laws. And the Indians do actually have treaties, right? So one of the first treaties that the 13 colonies signed, one of the first, was with the Lenape Moors, right? They call them the Delaware Moors or Lenape, right? Now the Moors turn around and add the word Moor to it, but it's just simply Lenape or Delaware, okay? It's standalone words, Lenape or Delaware, okay? And that was in September 1778, okay? So in 1778, the 13 colonies started signing treaties with quote-unquote Indians. All right? So now black people are now going back saying, oh, we Indians. And guess what? I got no problem with that. However, anyone who's called themselves Indians now has to study what? International law. Because you're trying to invoke a treaty. You're trying to invoke a legal personality to call yourself Indian. You're trying to claim yourself as being a part of a tribe or a reservation. Now, here's what you must understand when it comes to quote-unquote Indian. There's three ways that Indians are recognized. So the first one is Indians are recognized by what? A legislative act of the United States to recognize a reservation. That's one status. Another status is it can be an executive order by the President of the United States to recognize a reservation or tribe. And the third way is by the Supreme Court or a court. United States District Court can recognize someone's status of being of a reservation or tribe. So you got, it can be a legislative act, it can be an executive order from the president, or it can come from a court. Those are three ways that Indians are recognized. But they got to get permission from who to be recognized? The United States. Or they don't exist. You got to catch what I just said. The Indians don't have a right to turn around and recognize the United States. Only the United States reserve that right to themselves to recognize anyone calling themselves Indians. Listen. Jurisdiction. Let's look up the definition of jurisdiction because the Indians are black people who are actually not black. They have a right to self-determination to call themselves black, but that's not a nationality. Black is not a nationality. Okay? So we got to understand, what is jurisdiction about? Jurisdiction is about who has power, supreme power, based on their jurisdiction. So first, let's look at the definition of jurisdiction. Noah?
Jurisdiction can be defined as 1, power of a court to adjudicate cases and issue orders, or 2, territory within which a court or government agency can properly exercise its powers, case law.
Okay, so jurisdiction can be defined as power of a court to adjudicate cases and issue orders, or 2, territory. Jurisdiction is territory within which a court or a government agency may properly exercise its power. You see that? Jurisdiction. Okay? So Indians are trying to go back to a jurisdiction of an Indian reservation, etc., because they want to go into a different jurisdiction. Okay? Listen. However, let's look up this United States Code, okay? From the top.
U.S. 18 U.S. Code, section 1151, Indian country defined. Under U.S. Code, except as otherwise provided in sections 1154 and 1156 of this title, the term Indian country, as used in this chapter, means all land within the limits of any Indian reservation under the jurisdiction of the United States government, notwithstanding the issuance of any patent and including rights of way running through the reservation. B, all dependent Indian communities within the borders of the United States, whether within the original or subsequently acquired territory thereof, and whether within or without the limits of a state. And C, all Indian allotments, the Indian titles to which have not been extinguished, including rights of way running through the same.
Okay, so those people who want to be Indians, they want to be a part of an Indian country, reservation, tribe, etc., they should understand what's called jurisdiction. The United States is now invoking jurisdiction over Indians. You see, they even throw the word in there, Indian. And they say it's defined under what? Okay, what's the reference point? Title 18, USC, subsection 1151. Look that up, right? Title 18, USC 1151. It's going to tell you straight up what rights do Indians have, right? Because they're looking for their autonomy to be on a reservation, but do they have external self-determination? Or are they looking at internal self-determination? You see where we're going with this? Listen. Except as otherwise provided in section 1154 and 1156 of this title, the term Indian country, as used in this chapter, means A, all land within the limits of any Indian reservations under the jurisdiction of the United States government, notwithstanding the issuance of any patent and including rights of way running through the reservation. B, all dependent Indian communities. All dependent Indian communities. All dependent Indian communities within the borders of the United States, whether within the original or subsequently acquired territory thereof, and whether within or without the limits of a state. And C, all Indian allotments, the Indian titles to which have not been extinguished, including rights of way running through the same. So all Indians come under the jurisdiction of the United States. Okay. And section B, it says all dependent Indian communities. So all Indians come under the dependency of the United States. We're talking jurisdiction. So they have what? They have autonomy to self-govern on their reservation, but they still come under the jurisdiction of the United States. You see? This is what's happening. So you got what? You got black people thinking they going from being black to being Indian, and they think that there's some type of upgrade. No, it ain't.
It's a downgrade.
You go from being simply just subjugated to being subjugated.
Lateral transfer.
It's a lateral transfer, that's right. That's right. We're not being properly taught, are we?
No.
So black people think they run away from the jurisdiction of the United States, and they're not.
Maybe you're one of those people who unfortunately joined a fake nation. Scammers. Some straight up scammers, some straight up so-called indigenous people with agendas that don't favor us. They're telling some of y'all that you can pay your way to become an Indian. You can pay to be an Indian. And I use the word Indian because that's the legal term.
That's what we gotta understand. It's okay if you want to be Indian. I'm okay with that, but you gotta study law.
I know that deep down you feel like your life lacks meaning. The daily grind wears you down, leaving you feeling broken and lonely. You've got work stacked on top of school, compounded by chores and errands, and there's just no time for you to experience true joy in your life. You feel powerless and unable to find inner peace on your own. The pressure morphs into anxiety, and sometimes you wish you had guidance or a trusted friend to tell you what to do. Wouldn't it be nice to feel taken care of, for a change, to feel emotionally nurtured, alongside like-minded people? Wouldn't you love the support of a loving community that'll accept you for who you are and guide you into becoming the person you're meant to be? A place where you'd be treated like royalty, distinguished from the rest of the world. If I told you all of this is available to you right now, completely free of charge, hypothetically, would you sign up? For the more skeptical, the answer might be a hard no. Red flags are flapping in the breeze, and I'll admit, you caught me. I borrowed some rhetorical tactics cult leaders use to lure in new members, overpromising, preying on your fears, using demeaning language to manipulate you into following me. Cult leaders like Jim Jones were masters at code switching. He could easily change his tone and pick up on local slang to appeal to various people. He used this tactic to attract young leaders in the civil rights movement, promising them a community founded on racial equality. You're more willing to trust someone who speaks like you. That's why once you're entrenched in a cult, you learn a common vocabulary that becomes second nature. Scientology has a notoriously cryptic language that only they can understand. New members devote hours to studying their textbooks and dictionaries, perfecting this language, but what exactly is so bad about cults? I mean, think about it. Cults provide people with community and spiritual meaning, pillars of a happy, fulfilled life. Throughout history, most people would turn to organized religion to find these things, but that's not the case anymore. A Pew Research study in 2019 showed that 4 out of 10 millennials don't identify with any religion. With religion cast aside, you'd think secular culture would be thriving, and from a business perspective it is. TikTok and Twitter use algorithms to curate a feed just for you, keeping you on their platforms longer. Streaming services produce endless shows and movies, making it impossible to see everything, regardless of how many hours of TV you watch every night. People date on their phones and run their social lives through online video games and chat rooms. You're influenced by every video you watch and every targeted ad you click. Culture is an economic driver because it's tailored to the individual on a 1-to-1 ratio of screen to face. By creating an experience that targets specific individuals, social media companies keep you online. They can sell your attention to advertisers, which in turn makes them more money. As a result, our tastes have become increasingly niche. To recognize this, all you need to do is scroll through a friend's phone for a few minutes. The social media landscape would feel foreign to you. We each have our group chats and sketchy subreddits with weird inside jokes that are completely alien to even our closest friends. This is why it's quite difficult to find any real community online. Most spaces are made up of dedicated fans who congregate around one charismatic podcast host, band, or TV show. These groups mislead us into thinking we're genuinely loved and cared for, but are we really? Because the day you say something bad about the group topic, you're kicked out or cancelled, never to return. Doesn't this sound suspiciously cult-like? To figure that out, we need to determine what a cult is. The word cult is derived from the Latin word cultus, which means to tend or take care of. You'll see it in words like culture and cultivate, which bring up mental images of flourishing, interconnected webs of life. A farmer cultivates his field for the next growing season. A scientist studies a bacterial culture under her microscope. Popular culture from TVs, movies, and books give people common reference points to relate to one another. Cults work similarly. They thrive off the close relations between members. Okay, maybe that's how cults worked originally, but it's certainly not what most of us think of when we hear the word. In 1978, Jim Jones convinced over 900 of his followers to take their own lives. Around a decade earlier, Charles Manson instructed some of his members to execute 8 people, including a pregnant Sharon Tate. These historic touchpoints transformed the world as we know it today. Religious studies scholar Rebecca Moore says that now, cult is only used to describe undesirable groups that terrify us and pervert social norms. Scientology, Heaven's Gate, the Moonies. This is what cults have become, organizations that prey on the vulnerable, cut them off from their families, and engage in all kinds of abuse. This type of cult behavior is sensationalized, covered in the news cycle, molded into films and docuseries. People are obsessed with cults. The more horrific, the better. But by focusing our attention on the most sensational cults that most people won't willingly join, we ignore the more subtle cults. Ones that could also be dangerous, maybe even more, because we look at them through rose-colored lenses, so the red flags just look like flags. The word cult isn't completely taboo. We use it colloquially all the time. You might use it to describe your grandma's knitting club or your sister's pickleball league, often as a joke. In these situations, we're communicating the bonds people form around their niche interests. Sometimes these groups look insular to outsiders who don't know the lingo or social codes. It can be strange to observe from the outside. When she's with her knitting friends, Grandma suddenly sounds like she's speaking gibberish. The etiquette of the pickleball court still eludes you even after your sister has explained it 100 times. The connections these groups make mimic those made by members of more nefarious cults. A shared goal, insider language, an us versus them dynamic. Though Grandma isn't wielding dictatorial power with those knitting needles, nor is your sister using unsavory methods to lure new players into the court. I hope, at least. These, for the most part, are harmless cults. What I'm saying in essence is that cult-like behavior falls on a spectrum, with your grandma and sisters groups described as ethical cults on one end, and Charles Manson's and Jim Jones described as destructive cults on the other. Ethical cults are honest about their beliefs, and membership is low stakes. The diehard fans of a sports team or boy band might form ethical cults, what we call fandoms, around what they love. It's a group of people who share a sense of meaning and fulfillment around a shared special interest. Leaders might emerge like the leader of the fan club or a YouTuber that knows insider secrets about the band, but they don't tend to wield their power in overly manipulative ways. These cults nourish people and give their lives meaning, even if that meaning is Taylor Swift. It sounds silly, any boomers right now watching are most likely shaking their heads, but it's a good metric that qualifies our interactions with media today. Falling down rabbit holes and watching live streams, these activities become ceremonious, participatory actions in what you love. It's not pointless or mind-numbing, you are bringing yourself closer to something you consider godlike. Offline, ethical cults provide a break for those tired of too much screen time. Exercise outfits like CrossFit, SoulCycle, and hot yoga have amassed devout followers. Even scholars at the Harvard Divinity School have recognized these trendy workout crazes as a fundamental part of America's modern religious landscape. But anything from Dungeons to Dragons to cosplaying to drag performance can similarly affect groups of people. If a group enjoys an activity enough, it has the potential to morph into an ethical cult, which is kind of beautiful. Look at your own life. What do you do that gives you peace and happiness? Are you part of any clubs or take part in hobbies that make you feel complete and give your life meaning? You might be in a cult, an ethical cult, without even knowing. The problem starts when the pendulum swings the other way and the ethical cult stops being so ethical. There's an African proverb that says, "Who the gods want to kill, they first make mad." That's what the unethical cults do. They lie to you and gaslight you so much that you lose self-awareness and cognitive ability. Then you're locked in with nowhere to go and can't even think your way out of the situation. That's why most people trapped in this abusive dynamic choose to stay, even though everyone on the outside can see just how dangerous it is. They can't. They've lost their perception of reality. Approached on the street by a young, bubbly man with a bow tie and a clipboard promising the world, you might think you'd recognize the difference between an ethical and destructive cult, but you'd be surprised at how easy it is for the lines to get blurred. And you might be persuaded whether you think more intuitively or you take your time to reflect on things. If you think intuitively without understanding what a cult looks and acts like, you might sign up on the spot before you even know what's happening. If you reflect and think things through, you might initially laugh at discussing your salvation with a stranger on the street, but when you're home alone, you might take a quick look at the literature and think that maybe, just maybe, he was making some valid points. And before you know it, you're attending meetings, ascending the spiritual leader one payment at a time, and boom, you're a cult member. You see, one of the biggest differences between ethical and destructive cults is the observance of ritual time. Ritual time separates the sacred things we do from the mundane tasks in our everyday lives. Catholic Mass or the Jewish Sabbath are examples of traditional religions carving out a specific time for worship. To enter ritual time, you perform a symbolic action. These days, religious scholars count unrolling a yoga mat or tying up shoelaces before a run as acts that must separate the sacred from the mundane. Similarly, when the spiritual offering is complete, you must exit ritual time and return to everyday life. This might just be a simple namaste at the end of a yoga workout, but destructive cults don't allow their members to exit ritual time, which is a form of abuse. Every aspect of life is given over to serve the supposed sacred. No time off would allow you to process your spiritual life from a different perspective. That right there is the problem. Most people today would not willingly follow a cult-like leader like Charles Manson. Still, the never-ending digital culture we experience has made us more likely to engage in cult-like behavior without even realizing it. Yes, your Discord groups and TikTok For You page provide you with community, but do you observe ritual time within these spaces? You scroll during breakfast, while waiting in line or on the toilet. Social media's 24/7, fast-paced nature makes it difficult to leave this ritual time because of the fear of missing out. It blurs the boundary between the sacred and the everyday. You can spend the whole day defending Taylor Swift on Twitter or streaming the new BTS album, so you do without thinking too much about it. The sad truth is that when the sacred starts to intermingle with the mundane, and there's no distinction between what is us and what is you might be in a cult, and not an ethical one. I explain these ideas further in this video, discussing how overstimulation is ruining your life.
Narcissists see psychological manipulation as a form of art. The funny thing is, they know what they're painting. They just want to see how it looks on the fucking blank canvas. And that blank canvas is you. So every fucking thing that they say and do is just to see how it looks. Will it succeed? Will it go through? If you fell for it, will others fall for it? If so, they are now mastering their form of art. The whole point is to make themselves better and better at their manipulative tactics.